Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Thursday morning. Also, again, a lovely day in the Bay today. Zero wind. Seemingly, I can hear a lot more birds singing today. So, I'm looking forward to Thursday. So, welcome to session 4. Today, we're going to be covering distorted thinking patterns. I'm quite excited about today's session and tomorrow's session because I think if we start understanding our distorted thinking patterns, is going to help us a lot more, because remember, a lot of times our emotions are a direct result of how we think. So it's extremely important to find some distance. I keep talking about this word, psychological distance, between our thoughts and our consciousness, let's call it that, so that we are able to at least challenge our thinking. If not, we're going to become habitual thinkers and habitually think in this distorted way. Also notice, morning Leonie, welcome. Also notice I'm trying not to say the word negative thinking rather than and I rather want to use distorted thinking, because negative thinking and positive thinking are very similar. Morning Rain, morning Ashik. So I want to use the word distorted, as I said, rather than positive or negative. So let's start out by today just chatting a little bit about thoughts. We've covered a lot of it in our previous sessions. I do want to just remind you of the phrase that I want you to try and get stuck like a mantra in your head, is that thoughts are just thoughts. We're not really talking about emotions, but it's the same goes for emotions. Emotions are just emotions. So just try and remember this mantra: thoughts are just thoughts, and not necessarily the truth. They might be the truth, but it's not necessarily the truth. So, and also just from our previous session, just to remind everyone that our bodies do not know the difference between reality and imagination. Our bodies cannot think. So whatever the brain thinks, the body responds as though it's the truth. So if you think there's a burglar outside, your heart's going to race, you're going to get all shaky, and you're going to respond. If you think of yourself eating a lemon, your salivary glands are going to emit saliva, and you're going to salivate. So hi Elaine, welcome. So just remember that your body cannot think for itself. So if we are not monitoring what's going on in our heads, our body's going to constantly respond. So if you think you're depressed, the body has to respond like you're depressed. If you think like you're anxious, your body's going to respond like you're in danger. All right, so let's track across, I think, now to this opening line that I've got here, the quote that I wanted to start off today with. And this is a quote by George Christoph Lichtenberg. And this quote says, I'm just going to scroll down on the left-hand side. Morning, Patrick. Welcome. Glad you're joining us today. The most dangerous of all falsehoods is a slightly distorted truth. The most dangerous of all falsehoods is a slightly distorted truth. This is an extremely powerful saying. And it is exactly why fake news spreads like wildfire across social media. If the truth was so implausible, people would just discard it straight away. Morning, Carol. And not accept it. When I was in my teens and early 20s, I invented a game. Sometimes I'd be bored, so I would start playing what I call the obvious game. And the idea would be to see if I could get caught. I wanted to appear dumb or stupid. And the idea would be to just slightly tweak something, like garlic bread. I would say, this bread's very nice, but it tastes a bit garlicky. And then someone would say, well, that's because it's garlic bread. And if they sort of bust you, that was because you had made the truth too far from what it actually was. So false news spreads because it is very close to someone's belief system. And that's why it says so much about people that spread false news, because it talks about what their ideas are, whether they're racist, whether they whatever their basically thought processes are, but one shares it. So we've got to be very careful about what our paradigms are. And part of this whole process has been learning to understand your thinking patterns, learning to understand your belief systems and where they're coming from, so that we're able to challenge our thinking. All right, so I don't think there's anything more I want to say about that, but it's just extremely dangerous, and I want people to be aware, to be critical, keep an open mind. Remember, no one can take your mind from you. No one can take your thoughts from you. It's very easy to, if someone's not thinking, and if someone's not home, or if someone's on autopilot, for someone to take control of your thinking. But if you're at home, if you're conscious, if you're awake, people can't make you think something that you don't already think. So let's all wake up. So today we're going to go on to our first slide now, which is going to be speaking about, like I said, today there are 10. We're going to go through 10 distorted thinking patterns. In today's session, we're just going to cover the first 5 of these. So obviously when we get quite excited, or during periods of high arousal, our thoughts will start racing. The minute they start racing, we we tend to sometimes, again, go onto autopilot and our brains will take over. And then we can make these huge logical and intuitional leaps, following our gut instinct that may or may not hold up, may or may not be true. And also just to remember that between those, there are a whole lot of other little bridges that your brain just starts going, jumping around like a rabbit. I think in Buddhism, they talk about your mind being like an elephant. If it gets hold of something, it'll just keep going in a straight direction. If it wants to eat the maize, it'll keep walking through fences. It's also like a rabbit in that it jumps all over the place, and it's like a monkey in that it never stops chattering. So we make all these connections between irrational thoughts and possibly illogical and certainly not true and won't hold up for any challenge. So when our focus narrows, we close ourselves off also to any possible other information because we get into this panic mode or into this highly stressed mode. Remember, this can also occur not only with stress. So if you're feeling extremely tired, or if you're feeling tired, ill, or stressed. Those are the 3 times that your coping resources become very low. It also often brings out the shadow side of us, but mostly we tend to go to sleep inside and then allow this natural autopilot to take over. So we have to try and make sure that we are keeping on our wits about us. And another problem with once we start thinking a certain way is we tend to ruminate on it, like that elephant that just grabs hold of something and keeps moving in the same direction. Rumination, we'll circle over the same type, and the same type of destructive thoughts keep going on and on and on. And it's not only when we're sick or ill or tired, sick or tired or stressed, it can become an habitual way of thinking. So many people are permanently using distorted thinking patterns to apply to their lives. So we've got to be very careful that we are not being habitual. So that's why we have to be still and we have to check in with ourselves. Like that one slide I had is how often do we think about what we think about. So the first and most important distorted thinking pattern is dichotomous reasoning. The reason this is the most important, it's called many different things, okay? But it's when we start thinking in extremes, when we start thinking in absolutes. In one of those other sessions, we spoke about word prisons. So when you start thinking of always, must, have to, never, right, wrong, not fair, should, could, impossible, can't. These are all forms of dichotomous reasoning. A simple way of talking about dichotomous reasoning is to call it black and white thinking. And black and white thinking is arguably the most destructive of all thinking. And the challenge when working with black and white thinkers is that this is our hypothesis, but the majority of people are black and white thinkers. Again, if we just use that triangle that I spoke about, the majority of your population, the majority of people in any group that you speak to, the majority of people in your family will be black and white thinkers. And this I think is a good thing initially, because society wouldn't function without black and white thinkers. Society wouldn't function without structure and order. However, what a black and white thinker doesn't realize is that in between the black and the white is a whole lot of gray. There's actually a continuum between the right and the wrong. And this is the part that the black and white thinker doesn't see. So they have these regular automatic thoughts. In psychology, we call these automatic thoughts, it's a wonderful way of talking about automatic thoughts. We call them automatic negative thought systems. And a simple way to think about them is ants, or ants in my head, automatic negative thoughts. And unless you don't challenge them, they will be automatic, and they're going to keep running around your head, creating all sorts of disorder in your brain and your life. I wanted to use another metaphor just to talk about this black and white thinking, because I thought, how do I explain this sometimes to people? And the difficult thing with black and white thinking is because a black and white thinker only thinks in terms of absolutes, right and wrong. The black and white thinker, if they're not right, then they have to be wrong, which is very difficult for a black and white thinker to understand, because they don't understand there's a continuum here. The simplest way to explain it is I try and think of a balloon. Like if you blow up a balloon, you'd have the balloon's skin. The skin of the balloon would represent black and white thinking. Without the black and white thinkers, we wouldn't have a balloon. Inside the balloon is a whole lot of air. That air would be gray, and outside the balloon is an infinite amount of air. That air too would be gray. So an extreme black and white thinker, someone who's really caught up in their thinking, would also be an extremely anxious person, because if I pop the balloon would cease to exist. And I think this has also happened currently with COVID, is many people's belief systems, their structure, their order, their societies it feels like it's unraveling for them, and it becomes extremely anxiety provoking. And so black and white thinkers can be quite anxious people as they try and control the external environment into their way of thinking so that it fits into to keep them safe. All right. So I think the balloon metaphor is extremely important to understand. I think there's a movie, if any of you have seen it, I'm not sure if you've seen the movie The Grey with Liam Neeson. Often when I'm talking about black and white thinking, I speak about this movie. It's a wonderful movie. I think it's a wonderful movie. Many would disagree. Certainly the black and white thinkers would disagree. Spoiler alert, I'm going to talk about the end of the movie. But right at the end, it's Liam Neeson versus the wolf. It's a grey wolf, a timber wolf. And they're facing up against each other. And as they run towards each other, the credits come up. And you don't know how this movie ends. The movie's called The Grey, and because it's about a grey wolf, but also the ending is very grey. We don't know if Liam Neeson kills the wolf, and we don't know if the wolf killed Liam Neeson. But sometimes that's how life is. We don't have absolutes. We don't know what the ending is going to be, and sometimes we just have to live in the moment and see where that takes us. So, people have different responses to that. But just to understand that there's a continuum that exists between black and white. I was explaining to my young boy the other day about the visible light. Visible light has got 7 or 8 colors, Vibgyor 7 colors in it. But outside the one side is infrared and outside the other is ultraviolet. We can't see that. We can only see visible light. And it's the same with black and white thinking. There's a whole lot of space outside black and white thinking, and there's a whole lot of space inside black and white thinking. It's not just two options. And I think this is extremely important, certainly around discussion or conversations or arguments, and trying to understand that there's a continuum. All right, so I wanted to try something. I'm just going to give you some questions, and you're welcome to respond. I'll try and see if we can give you some time on it. I'm going to read out some exercises. If I was doing this as a workshop, I'm just going to give you 4 options and just 2 sentences, 4 questions, and just say which one you think is the distorted thinking or the dichotomous reasoning. So the first question is, or the first statement rather, is, I don't know whether Jamie is interested in me or not. Perhaps I should feel that out before asking Jamie out on a date. And the next one is, I don't know whether Jamie is interested in me, but nobody ever wants to go out with me, so I shouldn't even bother asking Jamie out. So is it the first sentence or the second sentence that would be an example of dichotomous reasoning or black and white thinking? It's the second. Okay, the next question. Nobody has ever come back from a 24-point deficit. I shouldn't even bother watching the second half. Then that's a huge deficit to overcome, but I'd love to see a comeback. Too bad I have to get some sleep. At least I've got a DVR. So again, the first would be your dichotomous reasoning. Go on to the next slide. Then the next example of distorted thinking is magnification and minimization. So magnification we often call catastrophizing, or making mountains out of molehills. This is when we take something small and make it into a big thing and overly analyze it and just pull all the angles out of it and start splitting hairs. The opposite of magnification is minimization. And this is now when we make molehills out of mountains. So we take something that's big and make it even smaller. And there's a problem with both of these, because catastrophizing, and I see again, if we just bring COVID into it, and I've realized that COVID is a bit like politics and religion and sex. We shouldn't be discussing it because people have very strong views on it. Certainly the black and white thinkers have strong views on it. But there's many people that feel that COVID is being overly made important and overly reacted to. Those people would be an example of people that are catastrophizing or thinking that people are catastrophizing. Then you've got the ones that are minimizing. Those ones that are catastrophizing then think the ones that are saying, guys, these numbers don't add up. People die every day. Only a few people are dying. They would be accused of minimization. So we have both groups sitting in this COVID example. And again, because I want to argue, because the black and white thinkers are more, there'd be much more that are magnifying the situation than those that are minimizing the situation. But both sides exist within this argument, certainly around COVID. And just to be aware, if when you go through life, are you catastrophizing or are you minimizing? And I think there's an argument for both, and there's a good time for each of those to occur. I'm going to give you again three or four sentences, and just have a think around whether these sentences are magnification or minimizing. Magnification, the first one. This person who is tailgating me is going to get us all killed. All right? That would be an example of magnification. It doesn't matter whether I do an assignment now or tomorrow, since it's not due until next week. That will be minimization. Because as soon as you procrastinate, you're normally minimizing. If I lose my job, I'll end up being homeless. That would be an example of catastrophizing again. Obviously, there's lots of things that could happen if you lose your job. And I think certainly what we're going through now as well, people are struggling with the economy and where's their money going to come from. We've just got to be careful we don't get too far ahead of ourselves regarding that. A 40-degree fever, it's nothing. It's only the sniffles. I'm not going to go get myself checked for COVID. That would be an example of minimization. All right. Then filtering. This happens regularly. And certainly if you're struggling with any, and I think at some level we all got low self-esteem or some insecurities, and certainly in different contexts of our lives. And filtering happens quite regularly. So with filtering, we have the one side of filtering, which is where we only hear the negative. And even though the comments, we might be doing a presentation and someone says, that was a wonderful presentation, but perhaps you spoke a little bit fast and you might have spoken a bit long. You won't even hear that part about the wonderful presentation. You just hear the negative criticism. So you'll say, oh, she said I spoke too fast and it was too long. So we filter out what we heard. I had a client once who said to me that at some point he took his report card to his parent when he was young and he had got 98% for a test. And he says his mother must have said congratulations at some point, but he didn't hear that. All he heard her say was, with another 2% he could have got 100%. And this destroyed him. And it became a program in his mind that at 40 he was sitting with a problem that he felt like he kept disappointing people, his staff, his colleagues, his friends, his family. And it was that one throwaway comment that stuck in his brain because he had filtered out the compliment and only heard the negative part, which was you're not good enough, get another 2 points to get 100%. So then we have, so that's filtering. So we filter information in order to fit into our paradigm. It sort of goes through a mental crusher. And if it doesn't appeal to us, it's almost like fake news as well. So we'll read fake news because it fits into our pattern, but we'll filter out anything else. So a lot of the people on Facebook that are fighting certain causes are only reading one side of the news. They're not reading both sides. They read one side and only read what fits into their paradigm. So that's filtering as well. So they'll only talk to people. They'll only listen to people that speak their language. Then disqualification. We call it disqualification or discounting compliments. So when someone says to you, oh, that's a nice shirt you've got on, you went, oh, this cheap one, I bought it at Pep Stores or Ackermans. Instead of just going, thank you, we will discount the compliment or negate it or deflect it or push it away, especially if you're struggling with esteem problems. And again, we'll try and talk it away, but all we have to do is say thank you. And once you say thank you, you internalize it, and that starts helping your self-esteem. But if you keep butting away the compliments, or discounting or disqualifying, you're not going to be able to ever develop your self-esteem in any meaningful way. So filtering is extremely important to understand and to keep aware of whether you're doing it or not. Then jump into conclusions. Again, extremely destructive, distorted thinking pattern is jump into conclusions. And again, I'm what's the word I'm looking for? I'm struggling to not want to keep bringing COVID into it. But with COVID, there are many people that are jumping to conclusions. Conclusions, overgeneralizing, making assumptions. So the conclusions are, it's a kind of with the catastrophizing as well, that this is going to kill everyone. And if you get COVID, I'm going to die. So this is part of this is jumping to conclusions as well as the black and white thinking in all or nothing thinking. So we have to be careful that we don't draw conclusions just based on what someone's saying to us. Be careful we don't make assumptions. And be careful we don't overgeneralize it to every situation then that goes on. Because just because it happened once doesn't mean it's always going to happen. Okay, or because one person in the suburb or neighborhood picked up COVID, everyone's going to have it. We've got to be very, very careful with it. As long as it's managed, it should be fine. Now I just want to read through a few. I'm going to give you some more sentences here just to check whether you've all been listening. So you can just have a listen and just think for yourself. Each sentence is an example of jumping to conclusions, distorted reasoning, filtering, or the magnification or magnification, or filtering. If James doesn't wear new clothing to school, I'm sure the teachers will call Child Protection Services on me. Okay, that would be jumping to conclusions and distorted reasoning or black and white thinking. Jane's boss says, you did a really good job with the presentation and I can't wait for it to go onto the web. You should probably change the font though. Jane ends up thinking she didn't like the font. She must think I have no sense of style. That would be an example of filtering. I know the doctor says I've got an ulcer, but eating jalapenos just this once won't hurt. That will be minimization. If you don't finish high school, it's unlikely you'll find a high-paying job. Again, distorted reasoning. I ate at that restaurant last week and got sick afterwards. You can't eat there. They've got poor standards. Jump into conclusions. and this traffic jam is going to ruin my life. Magnification or catastrophization. So then let's just jump down into a case study. So Maya's car broke down on her way to work one day, and she felt overwhelmed and didn't think about getting to work, or didn't want to think about going to work or dealing with a mechanic. So she thought she's going to take a day off because it wouldn't be a big thing if she missed it. But then she realized that there was a district supervisor was coming, and her boss, Janelle, needed all hands on deck. So she phoned Janelle to tell her that she was stuck and that she would be taking a subway into work, but that she's going to be late. The phone went dead on the other side, and Maya started panicking. What's going on? Why is she not saying anything? Is she cross with me? Have I let her down? She's going to probably fire me or say to me I'm trying to shirk my duties. And next minute, Janelle came back on the phone and said, sorry for keep you waiting. I just phoned my own supervisor just to check on something. I'll put you on hold for a minute. And he said, everything's fine. Don't worry. You don't have to come in for work. It'll be okay. So this is an example of jumping to conclusions and making assumptions. It's the same as what we touched on, I think, in a few sessions back when we spoke about the WhatsApps and 2 blue ticks and then putting a slant onto something when these things can't be happening. We're not mind readers. So mind reading, sorry, that should have also just come in under jumping to conclusions. So mind reading is something else. Mind reading and fortune telling. We don't know what's going to happen. So let's not get ahead of ourselves. We don't know what the future holds. So let's not get involved in fortune telling. And certainly mind reading. If someone looks at you, it's almost like another example would be arriving for work and someone looks at you and frowns. And you go, well, what did I do wrong? Is she judging me for coming in 2 minutes late? And they might be frowning because they were thinking about something. And another good example is I was coaching a lady once who was doing a presentation to an open plan office. So they were sitting there and 2 ladies in the back were giggling at something. And she said to me that she told them, can they stop giggling, because she had took it upon herself that they were laughing at her. And I said they might have told a joke to each other, or someone might have sneezed or moved funny or made a squeaky sound, and they could have just been giggling. So we've got to be really careful that we don't mind read or jump to conclusions. All right. So thank you. It's quite a lot of material to cover in 20-25 minutes. But if you've got any queries, like I said before, check in with me. You're welcome to ask me through private message or on the taper. Please say how's it if you've watched the video, so I know you're there. I really appreciate it. And thanks for coming, and have a lovely day. Cheers.